Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwann, and welcome to Selling Power TV. Today we have the pleasure of meeting with Nick Kane. He's managing partner with the Janek Performance Group. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Gerhard.
So let's talk about onboarding salespeople. I'm very passionate about that. It's a very important subject. What are the challenges that sales organizations experience when it comes to onboarding?
Yeah. Onboarding is one of those topics that's a little tricky and certainly is something that is very specific to each organization. We actually recently conducted a survey and some research in partnership with Selling Power and found some interesting data on onboarding. Some of the more interesting facts that came out of the survey results was in total, sales organizations really lack three key areas that ultimately help them put together an effective onboarding program. Number one, there's a lack of formality to the onboarding program, right? It's just sort of, they're winging it or not really putting a lot of structure in terms of their onboarding programs. Number two was the type of training that's being delivered, right? And we could talk about that a little bit more, but an overemphasis on certain types of training and a lack of emphasis on other type of training. And then lastly was a key component, how does coaching from the management team ultimately help support new hires that are being brought on?
And those are very, very important components. Do you suggest that sales organizations develop a process to integrate those three?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think what we saw is most organizations that have formality to their onboarding process tend to ramp up their sales professionals far faster than those that are more informal. I'll give you an example. What we saw for organizations that reported that they had formality to their onboarding process, at 6 months on the job, 60% of their new hires were at full performance. For those that were informal, it was less than 40%. So it is a substantial difference, right? There needs to be formality to the onboarding process. The challenge is sales leaders, what we saw is they tend to have a strong focus and an overemphasis on hiring experienced sales professionals and let them lead, let them mentor and coach, and they don't really put any formality to the training program.
So what do you mean by formality? What are some of the elements of formality?
There's a consistent approach. There's a consistent process.
Right.
There's a schedule. There's a variety of topics. Most organizations, what we saw that were more informal, primarily focused on product training and systems training. They lacked real selling skills training because again, they were focused on let's hire experienced salespeople. They can help support mentoring new hires. And there was an over-reliance on that type of hire. Right. The challenge with that, as you know, is the sales landscape has changed right over the last 10 or 15 years. Just because you were good at sales 20 years ago, let's say, or 15 years ago, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good today. Right? So it is important that organizations consider not only the formality in terms of structure, but also what topics are they actually covering in the sales training.
So what is your recommendation when you're a sales organization, you want to improve the onboarding process? Mm-hmm. What obstacles do you need to be prepared for? And how can you overcome those obstacles?
I think number one, consider how much time that you're lending to the onboarding process. It shouldn't be a 1 or 2 day session. I mean, it should be something that it continues for a longer period of time. Again, that could vary based on the organization and how intricate or technical the sale is. So that's one component, is consider and analyze the time. Second is, how can you involve the managers in that process, right? Are they effective coaches? Do they have the time to coach? Do they have the tools to coach? I think that's another key area. And then lastly, there should be a strong emphasis and focus on what are the topics that are included in your training program. It can't just be product training. Yes, that's important. That's critical. You need to know those key areas. But you have to consider selling skills and making sure that you have a consistent methodology that all salespeople adhere to within the organization.
Do you have any recommendations for sales managers? How much time should they spend with the salesperson while they're being onboarded?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's another key finding that came out of the research that we noticed, and a pretty big discrepancy. So when we conducted this research, we not only took the viewpoint of sales leadership, but we also considered frontline sellers as well to gain their perspective. There was a huge discrepancy in terms of, from a coaching perspective, how much time a manager felt they were spending coaching and how much time a sales rep felt they were being coached. As an example, sales managers felt that 50% of the managers that we interviewed felt that they were coaching at least 3 hours or more per week. Compared that to 15% of the sellers thought they were being coached 3 times or more per week, or 3 hours or more per week. So I think the first definition is, or the first key point is, what is your definition of coaching? Make sure that's embedded in the culture, make sure the organization is adhering to that, and make sure that you're giving managers an opportunity to have the time to be able to coach.
Are there any numbers that you can share when sales managers act as coaches during the onboarding process? How does that impact the new salesperson in terms of performance?
Yeah, there was double-digit improvement, right, that we saw with that. So if a manager is heavily involved and they're actually coaching the sales reps as part of the onboarding process, again, ramp-up time was far faster, speed to productivity was far faster, so it made a big difference.
Right. So how can anyone get their hands on the survey?
It's going to be out soon, actually. We're putting the finishing touches on it now, and it should be published and available to the public in the next 30 days or so.
So we are going to put a little URL at the end of the video that you can click on and get your survey. Thank you, Nick.
Sounds great. Thank you, Gerhard.